Hi everybody, it's Kay's mom. I'm just about to get my breakfast and I thought it'd be a good time as well for me to do this video, which I have been trying to do for some time now, which is about both of my labor and birth stories. Because both experiences are quite different from each other, I thought I'd share both of them with you guys, and hopefully this video is not going to be that long, so I'm going to go ahead and start whilst I am preparing my breakfast. So with my first pregnancy, I was at around 39 weeks pregnant when my labor happened, and it was actually, I was getting ready for bed and it was around like half 11 at night, and I was just lying down on the bed and trying to position myself to whatever was comfortable to get some sleep. And for some reason, all of a sudden, I felt a sharp, sudden pain, but it was a very, very brief pain. Like it lasted for like a split second or something like that. But it was just a really sharp pain type sensation that I've never felt before throughout the pregnancy. And I didn't really have any obvious kind of Braxton Hicks contractions throughout the pregnancy either, so I wasn't sure if that was probably a Braxton Hicks contraction or just some kind of like a positional thing that was sort of putting stress on my muscles, or if it might be a sign of labor. I didn't know. So I just went ahead and tried to, close my eyes and try to get on and get some sleep. But then after a few minutes, the same thing happened again. It's like somebody poking you and then it's gone, that kind of thing. But it was like a poke that was sort of like sharp and painful. But yeah, it happened again, and I realized that it was happening every few minutes. So after about probably a couple of hours, I was thinking it's either some kind of Braxton Hicks or I could be going into labor. So I timed it, and I was actually surprised because it was occurring consistently every 5 minutes, and I was like shocked. Then I realized this could actually be some kind of labor, but because it wasn't really causing that much discomfort yet, because it wasn't causing me that much discomfort yet, I didn't wake up my husband yet. So I just let him get more sleep, just in case it was some kind of false alarm, or if it wasn't a false alarm, then he definitely need energy for the childbirth anyway. And then after like a couple of hours, the intensity was definitely getting stronger. It wasn't just lasting for a split second anymore. It was already lasting for at least a couple of seconds by that time, and the sensation was definitely stronger. It wasn't like overly painful yet or anything, but I could tell that it was that kind of intensity that was picking up, and I knew that it was gonna get worse. So at that point I decided to, okay, it's time to wake up the hubby and just let him know that I was already getting contractions, and it most probably is true labor already. So yeah, so I kept on timing it, and then I think at around half two or something, because I was already starting to feel the pain, I decided to call the maternity unit. And so they asked me a few questions just to figure out how far along I might be. And at the time, I wasn't struggling yet to talk through the contractions. So she just told me that if it does get really uncomfortable and if I want, I can take some pain medications and then call them again if it gets any worse and all that stuff. So I waited again and kept timing it, and as it went on, the contractions lasted for longer and longer. By that time, it was already lasting to like close to a minute. I called the maternity unit again at around probably half 3 or 4 in the morning, and they told us to come down and so we can check how it's going. We went to the hospital, and by the time we got to the hospital, I couldn't talk anymore while the contraction was happening, and I have to like really concentrate and breathe through it to help me get through the contractions. It was already, that much pain. When she checked, I was only 4 centimeters dilated, and at the same time, my blood pressure was on the higher end. It was above the normal range for blood pressure, and because of that, plus the fact that I had gestational diabetes, she decided to go ahead and keep me there in the hospital and not send me home anymore to wait for the labor to progress. Okay, just sat down and got my blueberry cheese toast and my cup of tea. Anyway, so like after about a couple of hours, obviously the contractions and all that were getting really sore already, but then the dilation wasn't really progressing all that much. I think by that time, after a couple of hours, I was only about like 5 centimeters or something, so it was taking a bit slow. At some point during that morning, they decided to induce me already, because I was actually scheduled for induction anyway in like a couple of days, mostly because of my gestational diabetes and all that stuff, and they don't really want to risk the baby getting any bigger or something like that, or to wait for any complications. So I actually was scheduled for induction, but it's just that my labor started before the scheduled induction. So yeah, that morning they decided to go ahead and induce me as well. So they broke my water, and at the same time they added, if I'm not mistaken, is that oxytocin that they put in the IV to induce you for your labor? I think that's what it is. When they did that, like after like a few minutes, the intensity and the pain of the contraction it went from painful but something that I could still get through with just the help of breathing properly. It went from that to something that was like, oh my god, this is unbelievable pain. I want some kind of pain relief type of pain. So it went really quickly. There was no gradual progression from the pain that I was having before the induction. After the induction, it just spiked so suddenly that I was like looking for pain relief. So they decided to give me the gas and air. Like if I wanted to give that a try, I said, okay, I'll give it a try. But when I tried it, it was because I guess because the pain was just so much, it didn't really work for me. You're supposed to breathe it in during the contraction to take the edge of the pain. But even though I did that, what happened was I felt the effect of the gas, which was it makes you feel so lightheaded. It's like your head is floating. That type of sensation makes you all like dizzy, and at the same time makes you feel like you've no control of anything. But at the same time, I was still feeling such intense pain. So it, instead of making it feel better, it was just the dizziness and lightheadedness was just adding to the discomfort that I was already having. So finally it got to a point where I said, no, I don't want this Geissaner. I want an epidural. Once I got the epidural, it was like complete pain relief. I was like, oh, thank goodness. I was so relaxed. I just felt so relieved, like 100% no pain, that I actually fell asleep and was asleep for quite some time during the entire time that I was in labor. Like, I was contracting and everything, but because I didn't feel a thing, I was just sleeping through it. Sorry, I just had to eat. The only time that I would really know that the contractions were happening was because they were telling me that, okay, you're having a contraction because of the machine and also by the sound of the machine. But other than that, I didn't feel a thing. And then fast forward, I was already 10 centimeters dilated, so I was ready to push. I didn't realize how hard it was gonna be to try and push when you can't feel anything from your waist down. So whenever they tell me, okay, push, push, so obviously I would try to push, but it was like, did I do it? Am I doing anything? Because I couldn't feel it. It was so difficult. And then they said to just try to imagine, because you know you can't feel it because you have an epidural, so just try to imagine like you're doing a poo. So just try to like push down. Just try to push down and imagine you're doing a poo. So I tried doing that as much as I could, even though it was really difficult. And so they just kept on coaching me and trying to help me imagine it so that I can get the proper way of pushing right. And then they would say, oh yeah, okay, that's it. So that went on and on, but for some reason nothing was happening. I was like pushing already for maybe about 20 minutes, nothing was happening. So they called in a doctor to check, and they did an ultrasound, and the baby was head down and low, but she was a bit slanted in a way. So they said that's probably the reason why she's not going down. So the doctor did some kind of like a maneuver to straighten her. And so after that, we tried pushing again. I think I ended up pushing for over an hour, but still the baby wasn't coming out. And by that point, I was already getting really exhausted and frustrated and worried at the same time. Although the baby was fine, she wasn't getting distressed or anything, but because I was already pushing for so long, they told me that, okay, I think it's time that we have to take you to the theater and try a forceps delivery or maybe even a C-section. And when they told me that, I was just so, I just cried, and I got really scared and worried, and obviously it wasn't the ideal situation that I wanted to be in, but I was there, it was gonna happen, so I cried, but at the same time I did my best to just try and stay calm and go through it. So again, fast forward in the theater, I think they topped up my epidural, so I wasn't really feeling anything at all, except I did feel them like tugging or something down there. And then I just followed whatever instructions they were giving me. Like if they tell me to push, then I push. But I didn't really feel the head of the baby or anything. I didn't feel the baby. All I felt was like some tugging and stuff. And then all of a sudden they said, "Oh, she's out, the baby's out, the baby's out." And that was it. I was like, "Oh, that's it." So I was just so happy that she's finally out. It's finally over. I got her out. And then they put her on my chest and they were like cleaning her, and then all of a sudden I heard her cry, and I was just so happy. And then after that they took the baby away, and my husband went out with the baby, went out of the theater with the baby, and I was left in the theater, and the doctors were still working on me. I think they were stitching me up, but I did hear like splotching sounds in like a bucket. So I sort of had an idea that maybe I was bleeding or something. That's why they were taking some time to I don't know, stitch me up. But I wasn't really scared or anything. Like I had an idea that I might be bleeding, but I wasn't worried. So anyway, again, fast forward, finally they brought me back to the room, and I saw my baby and my husband and my mother-in-law were there, and I was just so happy because everything's over and I have my baby and I can see her, and she is so beautiful and perfect. And then the doctor said, "Do you know that you lost 2 liters of blood?" And I understood him, obviously, but for some reason I wasn't scared. It did not worry me at all when he said that. They just said, "Okay, you'll need blood transfusion." And I was like, "Oh, okay, do whatever we need to do." I'm just excited about my baby. After about a few minutes in the room, I started feeling cold, and I said to my husband, "Can you get me a thicker blanket or something, because I'm really feeling cold." And this was during the summertime. When I gave birth, it was summertime, and so they were all saying, "You feel cold? It's not cold, it's warm." And I'm like, "No, I feel really cold." And then I started shaking, and my breathing started becoming stressed, like I was like hyperventilating already. And basically I went into shock. They put some fluids into me, and after I guess a few minutes, I think I fell asleep while I was going through shock. And then when I woke up, I was already feeling relaxed and calm, and yeah, then my vitals started to go back to normal. I was able to hold my baby again and everything, but they did have to keep me there in that delivery suite to be monitored throughout the night. Thankfully, I improved quite a lot throughout the night, after the delivery. So the next day I was able to finally breastfeed my baby, and at the same time get freshened up, and then I was transferred to the ward. And at that point my legs were still like swollen, like literally swollen, that you can't see my knees. Like, where are my knees? They were that swollen. All in all, I stayed 2 nights in the hospital because it was a complicated delivery, obviously. It took longer for me to recover. I was just so happy because my baby was perfectly healthy and normal, even though it was a complicated delivery. I think it was only after like a few months or so that I realized that that was a really, really scary experience. And because of that, I felt anxious about getting pregnant again and having to go through the same kind of delivery worried me so much. Which brings me to the second pregnancy. But first, let me eat something.
Don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and if you like this one, give it a thumbs up and share.